Welcome to Therapy Sessions Cutting Toxic Family Ties. My name is Dr. Sherry Campbell, and I'm your host. I am a leading expert in the niche of toxic family abuse, and although my show cannot substitute for therapy, it is a survivor-based show. In me, you're not only going to get an expert, but you're also going to get a survivor, as I have also survived toxic family abuse. I know how hard it is. The goal I have is to give voice to the voiceless, to provide skills to help you to protect your peace, to stand your solid ground, and to navigate and heal the heartbreaks caused by toxic family. Please have a pen and paper available to give voice to your thoughts as you listen to each show. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your bravery. So let the healing begin. Welcome, everyone, to Therapy Sessions Cutting Toxic Family Ties. And let me just tell you about this human being that we have on with us today. We're obsessed with each other. That's fair to say. I was invited to be in her summit, and the summit was incredible. And it's all about empowering women, but not just women. I mean, in general, men could watch this summit, and it's about empowering survivors and overcoming abuse, because we have a lot of men in our community here, and every summit that we're in can fit, right? Because abuse is abuse, but she does focus on empowering us women, and gotta love that. So I'm so excited to have you here. I just think you're amazing, and your story is so incredible and so horrific, but who you've become out of your story is so powerful. And I know that if I can do it and you can do it, then our listeners can do it. So welcome to Therapy Sessions.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. I'm like, I get to be on your show. I mean, how exciting is this? We get to spend the next hour together. I can't wait. I live for this. This is so much fun. And I adore you. I adore you. Yeah.
I adore you too. And I'm so glad that you found me. And I just feel like we are all kindred spirits in this community. I think that's why the connections feel so instant so often for me, because I'm not interviewing someone that comes from a different life, and we're all in this strange, dark world, and society doesn't accept it. And, we're making our voices heard. And I'm just happy that you're here to help empower my stance in this movement I've created on being able to cut ties, right? So tell my listeners a little bit about yourself.
Okay.
I want to dive into the meat of your story, but tell them a little bit about your summit, your podcast, things like that.
Okay. So, thank you so much for having me here. This is so much fun. My name's Tanya Marie Dubé. I guess I'll just dive in because the whole point of this is, toxic family. So having a narcissistic mother, of course, I didn't know she was narcissistic, growing up with her, but she immediately put me into foster care, like from birth. So I lived in 7 different foster homes by the time I was 2 years old. And the 8th foster home that took me actually fought to keep me for 8 years. And I stayed with them. I went to court every single year to say, this is who I want to live with. This is what I love about my life here. And my mother would disappear, as narcissists do. They don't really love the responsibility of taking care of children, but they want it to be someone else's fault. So she was in and out of my life constantly. I remember for a while her coming every single weekend, but that's just the way my memory kind of is. I think I've clumped them all together. But as I got older, sometimes she would just leave me sitting on the stairs with my little red suitcase waiting, and she wouldn't come. And one of the greatest things about the family that raised me, I always called them my nanny and my papa because they were grandparents' age when I came into their home, and I was raised with all of their grandchildren. So my papa used to sit me down and he would just tell it to me like it is. He would say, kiddo, your mom's got addiction issues. She's got problems in her life. She was so young when she had me. She was 22. She just wasn't done. Gosh, I don't even think this woman had time to figure out her own life. I'm the second child. The first one's put up for adoption, so he was just very honest with me. And even though I did all the things we do when we have narcissistic parents, I still chased her forever in my life, looking for validation and acceptance and approval. He did really set the stage for, you are not the reason for this. This is not your fault, as children do embody this stuff, right? So around 10 years old, my mother had been gone for a whole year. Nobody knew if she was dead or alive. And she showed up in my life with a a new potential husband. And she was so excited about this. And I was too, because my dream, knowing that I was always in foster care and my entire neighborhood knew it too, I dreamt of having a mom and a dad. And in the community I was raised in Montreal, there wasn't a lot of dads that were there anyway. So it wasn't like I had something so different, I guess. But the dream of the mom and the dad and the house and the white picket fence and the sibling and the dog, like I wanted all of that. So I jumped right in. And when I met him, he was so charming and so persuasive and so sweet. And he really painted this big picture for me of the thing that I wanted, total manipulation. But here I was, 9.5 when I actually met him, almost 10. My birthday's in April, so it was like somewhere around there. He really set the stage. And so when I went to move in with them, leaving everything that was amazing in my life behind, he turned out to be a pedophile and he turned out to be viciously physically abusive, and so between now the two of them, I don't know what happened to my mother, but I didn't know her. And so in this environment, she became extremely physically abusive as well. And so for 2 years, it was just this massive shit show of a life. Like I just couldn't even believe it. Now, who I was as a person, I was like really, really well read as a child. I loved books. I really went introverted, just as a way, I think, to like escape everything. And so here I was looking at these two people thinking, you people are crazy. Like, this is nuts,
Yeah.
so nuts. Like, what is happening in this house? And so, yeah, my mother, when I was 12 years old, she had just finished beating the daylights out of me. It was the worst that had ever happened to me with her. I thought she was going to kill me. And I thought for sure this woman is going to kill me at some point because it was so violent. I had ran up the stairs that day and I had saved $18 and didn't have it under my mattress because my mother used to find everything. She used to find everything underneath my mattress. And so I had it saved. I cut a hole in my mattress and put all my money in there. So it
Oh
was
my
all
gosh.
bills. So I had $18 in my pocket and I was standing at the front door and I looked over at her to my left and she was holding my baby sister on her lap. And my thinking was, as soon as she leaves, I'm going to take my sister and my $18 and we're out of here. That was my thinking. And
Yeah.
she said to me, if you're thinking of taking her and running away, I will find you and kill you. But I find in my experience with narcissism, and this is my whole life experience with narcissists, they somehow read your mind. And I know
Oh
that
yeah.
how they do that is because they train us to behave in very specific ways so that we are predictable to them. But of course, I didn't know that. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's reading my mind. So my
Hmm.
next thought was I looked out the window and as I was looking out the screen door window, she said, and if you run away, I will find you and kill you. And I heard this voice in my head and it just said, run. I put my hand on the handle and I opened the door and I had between that door a few stairs to go down, a walkway, and there was a white picket fence that was closed. That was my obstacle. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to get from here to there? This woman's nuts. And so I did. The thing that saved me was that I slammed the door behind me as I went running. So she had to jiggle it. And I literally made it down the street and I lived in a cul-de-sac. And as I hit that alleyway, where a cul-de-sac will end, and I
Yeah.
just took off running, she was behind me. She was screaming at me, chasing me down the street. So it was from 12 then was the beginning of me living on and off the streets from 12 to 18 years old. And my goal was just to A, not get stolen, B, finish school, and so yeah, and so that was the beginning of all of that. And then a few years after I got out of that, I met my narcissistic partner that I ended up being with for 18 years. Yeah.
Um, it's like, what do you say to that? It's like one of the things that I'm really tuning into that you said is that, we kind of think they're psychic. It's like we feel like they can read our minds. And one of the things that I've learned from my own toxic parents is they're afraid. They know the wounding that they're doing and they know the natural reaction to that wounding.
Yeah.
And they push it and push it, but they're always waiting for the healthy moment to come or the rebellion to come. And I think that's why they're so predictable is they love to push the limits for sport
Mm.
just to see if we'd ever level up and actually do it. But because we're children and we're dependent, they actually are naive to think that the child would never do it, that they could
Mm.
scare us into submission. But whatever is in you, whatever is in me, whatever is in all of my listeners who've all escaped, we have that thing that got us out. And I can't even imagine what it must have been like, because my parents were married nine times between the two of them.
Oh.
So I had so many people coming in and out. It was like having a different life every 3 years. And I had to adapt to all these. One guy had 4 kids, another guy had 1 kid.
Oh.
You know,
Yeah.
it was
It's
insane. And
like you were in a
I
foster home.
was,
You were saying that before with all, it was like a
yeah, I'm
revolving
like, I
door.
was in a foster home, but it was like my own parents. It was so bizarre. And um, I was never really included in anything. And I really wanted to feel like a sense of family. And it's amazing how toxic parents can forget the humanity of their children. Um, I came home once from a field trip and my father had forgotten to pick me up. And I'd been gone for like 7 days on a bus. I'd been for 8 hours. So someone dropped me off and they were, whispering about it. And I saw his car in the parking lot. I knocked on the door. He didn't answer. And I'm like, what is going on? I have a big bag. I'm exhausted. I keep banging on the door. He opens it this much. His hair's all slicked back. He's in a suit. And he goes, what are you doing here? And I'm like, you forgot to pick me up. I'm home from my field trip. He goes, oh, shit. He goes, well, come in. I'm getting married.
Oh my gosh.
And I walked
Wow.
in, and the wedding was actually mid ceremony happening in my living room.
What?
And I look and I've got a bag. I've got red sand all over me. I've been in Zion. I mean, I was like looking at this woman I'd never seen
Wow.
with a couple of friends of hers I've never seen. And it was like slow motion. I'm walking by. There's a little preacher guy with a kind of like awkward. And he's like, go get changed. So I'm sitting on my bed and I'm like, what the fuck is going on?
Hmm.
And I went out, I'm like, yeah, congratulations. I was like, what? You can't make this stuff up.
That's
Like,
wild.
I picture you sitting there on the sidewalk with your red suitcase in the same way that I was sitting on the edge of my bed, like, I just don't matter. These people do not care. They don't care where I was. He
No.
had no idea when I was coming home. He's getting married to someone I don't know. I don't even know what happened to me after that. I don't know
Yeah.
where I stayed. I don't know if they went on honeymoon, no clue.
Yeah.
So it's the audacity of it. And we have to recover from all this while not having any time to do so.
Right, because you're just in survival mode. Like, even in that situation of him just throwing you into the stuff, it's almost like, how could you not feel unworthy inside of a situation like that? There's no conversation. There's no, here's this person. What do you think? Like there's nothing.
Do you like her?
Yeah,
And that's you. That's you sitting there like, God, I really want a mom and a dad. And I love Papa and, Nana. I can't remember what you called her, but
yeah,
I really want this. Like, I love them.
yeah,
And you had everything you ever needed there. But kids want their
they
parents.
do.
We want their parents. So, how did you survive and get yourself to school and eat and live from 12 to graduation? Like, how did you do that?
So, wow. So at 12 years old, I did have a girlfriend at school whose mother was like, come live with us. So I lived on the streets for a week and a half at this point. I had met her mother. Her mother was like, you got to come stay with us. That lasted for about a month and a half until my friend got insanely jealous that her mother was loving me. And she was really paying a lot of attention to me. And I was so grateful for this woman because I had no idea what to do. And so I could no longer live there anymore. So from there, it really started. I was sneaking into my friends' basements in the middle of the night, knocking on the that small little window that everyone's got in their basement, knocking on the windows, asking my friends if I could please come in. They were letting me in. Sometimes my friends their entire families would leave for work, and that's where I got to take a shower. And my friend was like, if you're going to eat anything in the fridge, take a little tiny bit of everything. I don't want my parents knowing that you're here. Like it was like that. staying in my friends' parents' vehicles overnight, and then they'd come knock on the window in the morning for me to leave before their parents came
Oh
out.
my
It
gosh.
was sleeping in church bathrooms. It was trying to stay hidden from the world. I still walk around to this day. I'm 49 years old. I still walk around my world and I'm like, yep, I would have hid there. Yep, that's where I would have slept. I still, like, my mind is still, like, I remember.
Yeah.
And part of it,
It's still part of your schema. It's still part
oh
of your
yeah,
mechanism of survival.
yeah.
One other thing that you said that I wanted to touch on is you became introverted. I always talk about like I just kind of disappeared. I wanted to become sort of like air or a wallflower or um because I was really angry through my teenage years and I was so built up with resentments because nothing I ever said was heard
Mhm.
and it built up this firewall of defensiveness and anger and nothing got me heard so I thought well maybe volume will get me heard.
Mm.
Volume didn't get me heard and then I started starving myself and I shut my voice off
Yeah.
and I felt so much better there than I felt trying to have a voice because I was abandoned every time my voice was used.
Mm.
And I think, like your mom, I mean, you were so young, and it's such an important time of life between 10 and 12, because honestly, you're starting to become a little girl, like a grown girl at that point. Some girls have their periods by 12.
Yeah, mine was 14. I was still very much a little kid in every sense of the
Yeah.
word. Can I say something too? It wasn't my
Yes.
mother and my stepfather wasn't my first like foray into violence. Like my mother had had so many boyfriends. It was like a revolving door. Every time I went to go see her, she used to take me to the disco clubs. I was born in 75. She used to take me out disco partying with her, until 4 o'clock in the morning when I'd go see her. And then I'd go back to my foster parents and my foster father, my papa would be yelling at her on the phone, like, what did you do? She's crazy. I'd come back all
Yeah.
wild. But my mother had all of these boyfriends, this revolving door, and I saw them hit her, punch her. Like this was
Wow.
as a little kid. So I had been around it before. But my home life, like my everyday life in this foster home, was the stability. And it's so funny
Yeah.
how people, and I get why the stigma is there, about being raised in foster care means that you've been through so many hard things, which is the case for a lot of people. But in my particular case, this was the best childhood I could have possibly had in that house with love and all these great kids. Like it was really an interesting, very different from what I've read about other people's experiences. But yeah, that was the
But thank
introduction.
God for you. I mean, I just feel so grateful for you that you had that. Abandonment isn't what people think. Abandonment is not dropping someone off on a doorstep and bailing. Sometimes that's the best thing that you can do. Abandonment is the everyday cruelty, not showing
Yes.
up, bullying, all of those things turn into abandonment. And I'm so happy that you had this experience because I'm sure being with that foster family was part due to you being able to have a resilience. Like you had a hope in people because you witnessed good people. I didn't go to foster care and I didn't have anything good.
Yeah.
So I didn't have that dichotomy. My life was so different than yours, and I always had food, home, and shelter. There was finances, there was money, but there were 9 marriages, so there I can relate to. It was like a revolving door because there were so many men and women in between the ones they married. And my parents were in the 70s as well. So I was born 71. And, my dad was like LSD by night and Quaaludes by day and
Wow.
hotboxing and there were little,
His gremlin
little,
car. No.
yeah, there were
Yeah.
all these, swapping partners and, everything that was happening there. CPS was called on me for my neglect because I was always outside naked sitting in a mud puddle.
What?
Apparently I liked the mud in my feet. I don't know. I was 2, but I know CPS was called. CPS at that time, what was in the home stayed in the home. They didn't really take people. So
That was like with me, we had CPS. Once I lived with my mom from 10 until 12, CPS was called. Like I was in 18 different schools by the time I was 18 years old, and we had lived in 11 different cities. And in every single one of those cities, I'd go to school with these like bruise marks around my throat. you know, it was
Jeez.
absolutely wild. And so, yeah, it was the same thing as you. So as soon as I turned 16 years old, I was like, this is my exit. Like I knew that at this point, I can't be put into foster care anymore because I can just run away. I know how to do that very well. And so I was just like, now I'm going to quit high school. My grades started to go down. I was always a straight A student. So my grades were going down. I was struggling to survive. So that's when I got a job and I got out of the foster care system completely. Just because I left it, but it didn't end there. But at least I was able to start, taking care of myself. And of course, I didn't know what to do with that. Like I didn't know.
I have a question because I think that survival is genetic on some level because
Mm,
I sit with 40 patients every week. And there are trauma levels. It's almost like I see people that have hardly survived any trauma and they're wrecked. And then I see people that have survived insane amounts of trauma like you and I have, and
mm,
we're thriving.
mm,
And so I think we all feel our emotions the same way. How that less traumatized person experiences pain is no different than the way I do.
yeah.
What triggers my pain and what triggers their pain may be different in volume or experience. And I treat them in the exact same way because pain is pain. But I guess for me, as sort of a doctor researcher, like I think some of us maybe are genetically prone to survival. Because when I'm listening to how you completely had this will to live,
Mhm,
and you knew what had to come first, right? And it's interesting too because I almost failed 3 grades.
mm.
I was the last person probably anyone in my small town would think would get a PhD, and that would include me.
Oh, I'm so proud of you. That's so good. Well done.
Thank you. I believed I was dumb.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was diagnosed ADHD as an adult. And I don't know if that's true or not. I do take 5 milligrams of Adderall. It's like this most tiniest amount you can take. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there comes a lot
um,
of anxiety that comes with,
yeah, I always
yeah.
felt like I was full of, like a Ferrari was parked and revving and it wanted to go.
Yeah.
So I was like the kid that was like bouncing in class, and I couldn't focus. It was so
Wow.
slow
Yeah.
because I think that my life at home was so fast
Mm.
that I'm sitting trying to listen to history and I'm like, oh my God, what? Like I just couldn't do it. So I needed to move. My body has always needed movement. And I thought I was a failure because I was failing. My parents were both educated as teachers and I was failing school, which to me also feels a bit ironic. But I feel like survival is genetic. I went inside myself to survive.
Yeah.
And I would do little things like I loved Little Orphan Annie, or I loved Yoda from Star Wars. I loved all these approachable
We're
things,
the
and
same.
I was scared. I was scared of the dark. I was scared of people. My dad was really violent. Um, Not on my mom, but I watched him beat the shit out of 2 grown men in front of me, and he did punch me in the face and bloody my nose. And then other things, he would yank me. I wasn't ever picked up. I was,
Yeah.
yanked, and he scared the shit out of me. And he was very volatile, and there was a lot of drug use, right? So I feel like when you grow up getting so afraid
Mhm.
of people, you can't go to the outside world. I think we do go to the inside
That's it.
world.
I was the same as you. I was terrified of people. And I was a performer too. Here I was in my
Oh,
normal world. I was a performer and I was a singer and I was a dancer. So I am a pretty extroverted person, I think, by nature, but that was not serving me in this new life at all. I needed to hide and I needed to stop. Like I didn't want people to hear me or see me. It was one of the things actually, when I had my children, that was really difficult for me. I had my daughter when I was just turned 31. Um, all of a sudden her noises brought so much attention to me that I was like, "Oh my god," I was so used to being able to go in and out of places.
wow.
I know, and
Yeah.
so, with her even talking to strangers, I was always like, "Oh my god." Like, it was such a hard thing for me to adjust to at the very beginning, and that's not something a lot of people might even think about, but when we're afraid of people and we learn to navigate the world a certain way, we form these habits and these patterns of behavior that just are really not serving us, but they are still a means of survival. right? So I was
I
like
so appreciate that you shared that because I do think that we do things that other people would never think of.
yeah.
Like that makes so much sense to me because it had nothing to do with your baby or shame about her. It's just she makes noise and people are like, oh my gosh, look at the baby. You're like, "Ah," so I
Yeah.
can totally relate to that. I have this question. So,
Mhm.
how do you feel that you were in foster care and it's such a huge impact on your
Yeah.
life and even the homelessness. How do you feel like that's shaped your perception of motherhood and how you parent your
That's
children?
such a great question. Thank you for asking that. So, I think that because we had a small revolving door of children in my house, we had one emergency room, and that room, the other rooms were filled, and we were there longer termish, but we had that one room. And so, because we were taught, like we had this thing at dinner time where it was a very nuclearish family, right? So, at dinner time, we all sat down together. My nanny had made all the food all day. We all sat down together, and my papa had this thing that we did where we each took turns to say how our day went, what went really well, what we didn't love. And we all were asked to listen to each other. And we were meant to do that. We weren't allowed to talk in that time. We were listening. And so that was really cool for me to see because my mom and my stepdad were just like crazy nutso people. And so I had none of that. Nobody cared what I thought there. So that was really different for me. So when I became a mom, I started to do these things with my children when they were really little, and we'd have these like monthly, once a month, sit down together and be like, okay, you guys tell me, what you think I'm doing that's good, what you need more of, what you think I could use more of, like patience, stuff like that. And so we would do this every single month from when both of them were 3. And so we still do it now. We just don't do it as frequently. They're almost 14 and almost 19 now. But, we always have had this way of communicating about us that I don't want them to ever feel like they're property, that what I want for them is all that they should want for
Yes.
them. I want them to find their happiness. And I think, I'm a very spiritual person. I think that in this, situation, these soul connections that we've made here between the 3 of us, I think my job for them and possibly why they picked me is because of all the experience I have to open their eyes up to being just to see, that we are all people doing our best to learn what this is all about and why we're here, and to show up properly for yourself first without it feeling selfish and without feeling guilt about it, because that was me forever. I learned insane people pleasing skills through this survival. You know,
I was a master as well. I was so masterful, people pleasing, because it does
yeah,
keep the scaries away.
yeah,
I can be very similarly on a spiritual level. I really believe that we even contract our own traumas on some
I
level.
think
And
so too.
I don't know if I just took too many hits on the bliss pipe when I was choosing, but if we go there
Well,
again, we need to monitor each other. But after my dad died, I felt very strange. I felt like now all my boundaries were gone.
mm,
And I felt like he could see me. And I felt very invaded. And
wow,
um, I felt very unsafe because on earth I was like there were boundaries. So I wrote his
mm,
name down on a piece of paper with his birth date, and on the back I put all karmic contracts now closed, no void.
wow, well
And I
done,
burned it
well done. That's amazing.
because I want to protect. That just made me feel safe, and it made me feel like there was closure to that karmic connection because I feel like my daughter, I knew I was having a girl for 2 years before I conceived.
Mm,
I just knew I
yeah,
could feel her presence around me.
wow.
When we went to get the ultrasound, I'm like, I already know. I already had her named, and I just knew, and it was a girl. And I think she's such an old soul, and she lived 11 years of my pain with me.
Mm,
And like you, I married a toxic person, and I married him older, so I didn't have an
mm.
18-year trauma with him, but I had a good 8-year trauma with him,
Any
right?
trauma
But
is trauma with a narcissist. Yeah.
any trauma is trauma. And I do feel like one of the things that you said very early on is your papa always told you the truth.
Yeah.
And I am a big believer in telling my daughter the truth. When she would say, dad does this and dad does that. And I'm like, yes, that is how he is. And he's not going to change. So we have this custody thing that the courts are saying that they have more power than me. So you have to go do this every other weekend, and we have to help you to know what to expect because he isn't going to change.
Mhm.
And I cannot even tell you how helpful I can see that was for her, because when I was growing up, my mom has a very magnetic, charming external personality.
Yeah.
She runs charities for burned kids. She runs charities for cancer kids. She teaches suicide classes at the high school. I grew up with this woman saying I should just kill myself. So it's so ironic, and people believe that that's who she is. And so, but I had a home devil. At home, I had a home devil. This woman hated me, continues to hate me, and no one would ever believe me.
Or protect you.
Right. I would always
Where were
say,
the adults?
she
Yeah.
loves you. She didn't mean it that way. So I never wanted to do that to my daughter. And I think that raising kids for me has always about, let's just be open and honest with one another. And we're so close. And I can sense the same for you and your kids. And do your
Mhm.
kids know what happened to you?
They do.
What are the questions they ask? Like, are they like, how did you do that? How did you get through that? And how do you think them knowing your story has inspired them?
Oh, wow. Okay, well, first, can I speak to the mother thing?
Yes.
When my mom passed away, I went to her. When I found out she had breast cancer, she actually called me up. We had been estranged for almost 5 years. She called me up and just said, I found a lump in my breast. That's all she said. I don't even know how she knew my number. I love to travel and I tend to move where I travel because I think it's fun to do it like that. So I don't know how she got my number, but she got my number. And so from that point on, I was trying to help her, I guess. I don't know, figure it out. It was horrifying to me that my mother had breast cancer. And so when I found out that my stepfather just dumped her off in a hospital when she was near hospice,
Wow.
her best friend had called me up and I went out there to take care of my mom for 3 weeks, which was wild, feeding this woman. She had dementia. She didn't look the same. Her body was emaciated from everything to do with cancer, so it was an interesting time. But when she passed away, I went to her funeral and it was shocking to me to hear all of these people say the most loveliest things about this woman who handed me over on a platter to a pedophile. You want to know how she did it with the pedophile? I'll tell you really quickly. He sat me and her down, she and I down in his office, and he said to her in front of me, I think the way that they always called me Tanya. My name is Tanya, but this is like narcissist, right?
Yeah.
I think the way that me and Tanya are going to get, closer is if she sleeps in my bed with me.
Oh my
And my
God.
mom said, okay, I'm not even kidding. So this woman, who beat me, turned me out, fed me over to this pedophile, did all of these things literally to try to break my spirit, had all these beautiful things said about her. And I was in shock.
Yeah.
I was not expecting that at all. Like it was like a kick to the stomach. And so, I was sitting there and I was listening, and my mom had said some horrific lies about me that were never true. Like nothing, not one
Yeah.
thing that she
Yeah.
ever said about me. And they were pretty bad, And so now I'm sitting amongst her tribe and they're all glaring at me like I'm this horrible person that probably sent her to the grave. So my aunt had come over to me, who at the time was one of the believers, of my mother, one of the flying monkeys. But she ended up saying to me, I want you to go up there and say something about your mother. And I was like, for the love of God, you do not want me up there. I was angry, sad, horrified. I was just insanely angry. I couldn't even believe that that's what these people believed about this monster. She was a monster
Yeah.
in
I
my
felt the
life.
same way. My mom manipulated my father's death against me. She tried
Oh,
to
wow.
use it to have me break no contact. So she was triangulating people. And one person she triangulated asked, like, well, what is Tom suffering from? I mean, if you're going to ask me to deliver this information, I'd like to give her some information. She goes, nope. If she wants to know, she can call me. So I chose not to. My dad's last words to me were a violent threat to put me in a hospital. He had 7 years to fix that. So coming at me at the 1 yard line was just, I'm not his maker. So he was just manipulating my need to have a daddy,
Yeah, that's what they
get
do.
me to go to the 1 yard line because there's no atheists there apparently. so that he could get out of meeting his maker. So, like the maker's going to see that you did that. So
Yeah.
I chose not to because
There's
everything in my body did not feel safe to be around him. And I didn't want to hear anything good because I just cannot see, because I do not believe that death changes people. I think
I
choosing
don't
to
think so.
change changes people. When I saw his obituary, my birth name is Sharon. So it's kind of a Tanya. And I was only called
Hmm.
Sharon if I was in trouble. And they had me as Sharon on his thing, knowing that I've never gone to show.
Wow, that's like posthumous
It's
after
so
death smack in the
offensive,
face.
right? It's so
Ah,
offensive. And I
how
feel
awful.
like those moments when you were there and you saw that, and I had a similar experience too, when the outside world doesn't have any clue what's going on inside the home, and they just judge by a cognitive dissonance that it's all good because family's everything. It's such a mind fuck for us that are trying to survive it. But I want to move back to like, how do your kids, because my daughter
Yeah.
hears my story, your kids hear your story, and there are people like, oh, they shouldn't know your story, you're turning them against their grandparents, or they shouldn't be exposed to that. Why not? If it's who I am authentically, it has inspired my daughter. She has such better boundaries than I ever had growing up. And it doesn't mean she's not afraid
Yeah.
to set them, but I've watched her go against peer pressure. I've watched her disengage from her dad. She wrote his therapist a whole letter, sent all their text messages, and then wrote the letter, and her dad refused to acknowledge it with her. But that was
Mhm.
it for her. She cut him off. So I do feel
So,
like your kids have to be inspired.
yeah, well, let me preface what I'm about to say with I have always been a firm believer, always, my whole entire life, that if somebody is toxic, for me, remember now how I was living my life for the longest time. I was at the mercy of people. So I could see when something was coming at me that was really dangerous, and I ran from that. Like I ran away. I didn't stop to try to make excuses for it. Like in that scenario, in that environment, I was like, no, not good for me. And I was chastised for this so much in my childhood, leading all the way into my adult
Oh,
life,
I get
being
it.
able to walk away from people who are not good for me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but those are the narcissists that say that. Like
Of
now I know
course.
I was surrounded by narcissists.
Yeah, or
And
they're
so they
flying
were the ones.
monkeys who have
Yeah.
somehow become manipulated to believe that our parents are this big
Oh,
victim.
crazy. Yeah. And the ex-partner too, right? Like it was
Yes.
just, I'm really good at being able to do that, and not in a mean, horrible, awful way. Just to say, I'm allowed to opt out. You're allowed to be exactly the way that you are, and I'm allowed to opt out, and I don't owe anything for that.
I love that. I'm writing a workbook where it's our God-given right to say no to anyone who's predatory, bullying, abusive, neglectful,
Oh my
whatever it
God.
is. It's our right to say no. And to say no is the healthiest thing that we can do. You're so empowering. I mean, I could have a 5-hour conversation with you. I absolutely have to have you on again because I feel
I
like
love
there's
it.
still so much that I want to ask. And I feel like you so many people struggle with cutting ties, and I completely get it. It took me 4.5 decades. It's not like I'm lopping off limbs of
Yeah.
parental support because I want to. It took such a long time to do it, and there's such a stigma against it. And when I got on that TEDx stage, all I just wanted people to know was like, not all parents are good. I'm not saying all
Mhm.
parents are bad. I'm saying not all parents are good. And we have to make room for this in our society. What advice would you give our listeners today who are in similar situations, torn between like loyalty and protecting their parents or protecting their own well being? What advice
Mm.
would you give?
Okay. Well, that's a great question. And this does tie into the question you asked me before that I still didn't answer about about my children and how it's affected them. So I teach my children the same thing that I teach and I speak about all the time. It's this: if we're going to think of ourselves as souls in these bodies having this human experience, then it goes to reason. To me, in my mind, using one of my higher faculties, which is reasoning, that I am not, this world is not meant for me to suffer through. This world is meant for me to find my balance within myself and to say intuitively feeling myself in my body, which let me tell you, has been one of the most challenging things of my lifetime, is to feel in my body. You
Oh,
know, so
same.
it's to feel, confident and comfortable enough to trust my intuitive self. And you got to do this in baby steps, right? But I have to be able to know, using my higher faculties, what is good for me and what is not, as I create the circumstances of my life. I'm not waiting for the circumstances to present themselves for me.
That's right.
So I started doing personal development work at 17 years old, and it's been a lifelong pursuit of psychology, answering the question, why do people do the things they do?
Yes.
Because of my mother.
Yes.
But even my foster parents fighting for me, I know that's so uncommon, so it's like I've always had, the I don't know, like the desire, I suppose, and the playfulness and the curiosity to just really understand myself more, because I know that this was a big thing for me. If I don't trust the world around me, which I did not forever, if I don't trust the world around me, that is telling me that I really don't trust me. So the more I get to know me, the more I get to know you. And so this has been the driving force of my life, is to just really understand myself. And that means that I got to get through the societal and the familial
Yes.
conditioning that blood is thicker than water. That is bullshit to me. If you are mistreating me, you are making my life miserable, and I feel like I'm being tortured by you every time I'm in your presence. You are not for me. And this soul contract served its purpose. And now we get to walk away.
I love that. Oh my God, that was so powerful because I do think like I could not love myself until I knew myself.
That's
And
it.
I started my self-discovery process probably around, I mean, I didn't have a choice. I mean, I was suicidal in fifth grade. So I started seeking anything and everything. And I had paper parents. I turned to fiction books, Little House on the Prairie. Then I had
Yeah.
Annie, Pippi Longstocking, Punky Brewster. I had
Nancy
all these
Drew.
heroes. I was a phenomenal athlete. And I think too that was something. I had great coaches. I had other experiences in my life that could give me self worth. And we did have income. So I think that having income provided just a certain amount of maybe food, home, shelter, safety. But of course, I was financially abused because anything that was given was taken. But what I want to pull from what you said is I was raised to believe that if I wanted anything good, I had to suffer for it,
Mhm.
that I had
Yeah,
to
me too.
suffer. And it's something I'm still even in my programming today because I'm such an overachiever that I have to realize like, miracles in my life can happen without me suffering for them, without
Mm.
me dying or killing myself to get one. Like I'm worthy of effortless, miraculous things happening in my life just because I'm a good human being, just because I'm in this life. And that's just also a part of life. And I have to learn to recognize when those effortless miracles are there, right? Because I was so not in my body as well. I lived in my head and I was constantly trying to figure out how to survive the next thing. And I was terrified if people were mad at me, or I imagined they might be mad at me, or they might not want to be my friend, or the bottom was going to fall out. And those are still things that I think that we live with as experts. And I don't think there's an end date to this kind of stuff. And there is no right or wrong when it comes to cutting ties. I believe it's an evolution. I think that we evolve our way to there. I ended up in no contact because she cut me off. And the game was silence and ostracize her, and then she'll mend the fence. And I'm like, I don't have any more tools to mend this frickin' fence, nor do I want to do the hard labor of it. I'm going to start working on me. And what I want my listeners to hear, and I definitely want to have you on for a part two, because I just
Okay.
still have so many questions, and I love the way you think, and I love the way you speak. And I just think
Mm. Thank
that
you.
people don't think about reasoning. They don't think about the higher levels of, you can reason for yourself. You can pull on mindfulness. You can pull on emotional regulation. What are those things? It's not about dimming your light or dimming your feelings. For me, it's about choosing the tone, the pace, and the timing. Feel the full throttle feeling, but choose the tone, the pace, and the timing. This is all reasoning. And cutting ties with abusers, and we're going to end on this, but this is a reasonable decision. And that is what you just brought to light so clearly, is that for every one of you that's listening, it's a reasonable decision to cut ties with someone, including family, especially family,
Mm.
especially family. where you should feel the safest, if that's where you're the most unsafe, then you need to take care of yourself because you're never going to heal in an environment that is poisoning you.
If we can think of it instead of, like this is what I always say to my children, like in this incarnation, yes, I'm your mother and you're my child, but on a soul level, I am not your mother and you are not my child. We are doing this together and individually. So I think one of the most helpful things to do, instead of thinking, well, this is my mother though,
Yes.
or this is my father, like how do I do this? Why not maybe think of it in terms of soul contracts and the purpose for these relationships? And is that purpose done? And now we're just holding
Yeah.
on to it and trying to make it work because that's what people tell us to do. That's part of the conditioning that we have to break free from. Because if we were raised in a completely different environment where they said, the adults in the world said, your job, Sherry, is to figure out who you are as a soul in this incarnation, using that word very specifically. Your job is to figure out like how to live an abundant life and how to truly love and nurture your inner self. Then from there you go and you experience the world through that lens.
Yeah, that existential view, right? That existential view is beautiful.
If you were taught to go about it that way,
Yeah.
then it would just make sense that, well, we don't really need to keep people who are toxic around us. But also, how much toxicity would there really be if people were all treated properly? So, all things being equal, why not take that piece and look at it as soul contracts instead of this burning desire to have a mom and a dad when that mom and dad isn't presenting properly?
Right. And
You
that's
know?
why after my dad died, all karmic contracts now closed, no void.
I love that you do. Do you know Dolores Cannon? She's deceased now, but in the
Yes.
80s, she's this
Yeah.
big spiritual person. She taught me through one of her videos I saw on YouTube. That's all I needed was this quick little snippet.
Yeah.
But the way that she ends these soul contracts, I would definitely suggest people go look for this if you want to. But the way she says it is she does it in meditation, and she brings like the two higher selves of the two people into the meditation. So me and my mother, our highest selves together in the space where we just are. And this is a little hard to hear if you're going through it, the painful stuff right now.
Yeah.
But thank you for the experience. I don't need this anymore. Like we tried.
Yes.
We really, really, really
I
tried
have
and
a
it didn't work.
tattoo
And
here,
that's okay.
and it says
And
BTBF over a butterfly on my lifeline. Better
oh,
to be free. BTBF.
yes. And then you say, thank you for
Yes.
this. And I set you free.
I
You're
set
free
you
now.
free.
You're
It's kind of
released.
like another take on the let them theory.
Is
It's like
that? I don't know what
set
that is.
people, if someone's going to gossip about you, let them. Let them.
Oh, yeah.
If
Right.
someone's going to be toxic in your life, let them go. Let them.
Oh my
You
gosh.
can't
Can
keep,
I say something about that?
yeah.
Something that I learned that was really hard for me, like the character assassination that comes with
Oh,
narcissists and all
gosh.
the lies they start telling about you. That was hard for me because of the people pleasing stuff, right?
Yeah.
So after I left that 18-year relationship, I was like, I need to do things differently because I think I'm sabotaging myself in so many ways. Okay, so the way I dealt with that, him talking about me, because this had already happened with my mother, which will feel like validation, like, are they right about me?
Oh,
Or am
yeah.
I the narcissist?
Well, and
But it's
everyone
not,
believes
right?
them.
Oh my gosh. So the way that I dealt with that was okay, so what is the goal here of the narcissistic person? It's to make you look bad.
Yeah.
It's to get you in your emotional body so you're freaking out and panicking and having all this anxiety. But really, what needs to happen is you need to figure out how to be happy intrinsically from the inside. What can I do to bring me more joy and fulfillment and love? Like, how can I love myself more? Because that way, when the narcissist is like, yeah, look at this crazy person and you're living the best life you can live, you don't look so crazy. And now people are looking at the narcissist like, what's going on?
Yeah,
What are
I
you
always
talking
talk
about?
about the timing. Like the smear campaign for me burnt the whole forest down before I even had a voice. I was like, oh, well, it's too late.
Crazy.
And I think the positive thing about
Yeah.
that is because I've always had to go inside. I've always found that when I would shut my mouth and I'd move my feet, move my body away from their bodies, and I would stay where my feet are, and I would put my little blinders on and earplugs into the smear campaign happening in my cul-de-sac, I would just start living my best life quietly and elegantly and intrinsically and with poise. And then the results of that work were showing. And so I've never wanted revenge. I've never wanted to be filled with something like that, nor have I sought redemption, but I've gotten it. because I just pulled back. You want to have your smear campaign and involve all the neighbors. Okay, I'm going to let you because I have better things to do than to do that.
Yeah.
And they end up showing
Yeah.
themselves to be exactly what they're projecting out that you are in that smear campaign. And they sink themselves. I'm like, you never have to do anything with a narcissist. There's all these nooses in front of them and they act out and they just hang
Yeah.
themselves all along the way. And that's what I've always found
Well,
to be true. What I want to say before we close is you're so inspiring. I definitely want to do a part
mm,
two. I still have like
mm,
questions in my little phone that I want to ask you. The
okay.
woman that I learned the name and the birth date and the karmic contracts is a woman. I think her name's Christiane Northrup, and she wrote Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. And she's
Mm,
really spiritual and she talks a lot about menopause and other things. And she's great. So she's someone too outside of Dolores that our readers can look at. But I really want people to know how to get you. I want them to have a way to like look you up, find your summits because my following is going to just fall in love with you the way I did. And they're going to be so
oh,
excited that there's a part two. So tell us how we can find you and all the good things.
oh my gosh. Okay. Well, the first place to go is my link tree. So if you don't know how to do link tree, it's linktr.ee/ Tanya Marie Dubé. Yeah. That's the first thing. And then if I can offer something to your audience, I don't know if this
Yes,
is if you
please.
want to do this or not, but I have this thing that I created called 5 Steps to Reclaim Your Life After Narcissistic Abuse. And it's all about going within, reconciling, that no, you are not crazy. No, you did not deserve this. But it's 5 simple steps, right? To just get started in the mindset and the emotion of that. So I'll give you that link and you can post that if you like.
Would love
Yeah.
to.
And then
Yes.
yeah, that's been something that's really helped me just calm myself down again and just know I'm going to be okay. I can learn the steps to trust myself. But yeah, but thank you for asking that.
Oh my gosh, yes, because I think that you offer so much. I think you're just a wealth of
Um,
information, not just through education, but more importantly, even just surviving all this stuff. I think you're just fantastic and you're inspiring. You're just such an
mm,
inspiring woman, and I cannot wait for this to drop. So I'm really happy, and we are going to schedule a part two. It'll be after the first of the year, but we are going to schedule that. So
okay.
I just thank you for
Yeah.
coming on Therapy Sessions. We all love you. You helped so many people today. And all right, you guys, I'll talk to you the next couple weeks. Until then, be well. Take care of you. Well, Bravehearts, that concludes our amazing therapy session for the day. Please sign up on my email list at drsherrycampbell.com so that you can be in touch with me and see what's going on in terms of what I'm offering soon, what books are coming out, etc. Talk to you in a couple of weeks.